All signs of heist point to a wealthy mogul, but why would somebody with so much money choose to steal? That's the story of Thomas Crown Affair, and this week's discussion, I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds.
Hello, as usual.
And originally I was going to start the discussion with a kind of hero slash villain kind of scenario, but I think instead we'll kind of save that for another time. What I started kind of thinking about, though, maybe starts off as a bigger theme for this particular topic or episode, stuff like that, is how we have a rise of anti-heroes. Probably certainly there's been ones that are popular many different times. In some ways, even the Lone Ranger is even though he's a hero, he's in some ways an anti-hero. But I feel like in recent history, we have shows like Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, on and on, they're definitely not your typical heroes, and certainly that's going to be what we're going to cover a lot today. And I thought maybe you have some thoughts about why is it that these have really captured more of our imagination now than ever.
Well, I think this is actually, I think, connected to Stoicism, because a lot of you notice a lot of the characters we deem as cool are they have a very calm kind of acceptance of their fate. Like James Bond is very kind of laissez-faire about him potentially dying at any moment, or these frivolous sort of pleasures may be gone here today, gone tomorrow, this kind of thing. And I think this kind of cool acceptance of events, and that the fact that we can't change externalities about us, make the moral decisions much more appropriate to the scenario, rather than like a classical, this is a person who's 100% good through and through, and this person's it's more realistic. But I think it also, from a sort of philosophical basis, is more kind of I don't know. I can only sort of describe it as a sort of oddly sort of soothing approach to life, is that you just sort of accept all these sort of dangerous things with a sort of a cool head, on being able to keep your head in these situations. I think that's kind of the rise of the anti-hero.
At the same time, I feel like there's also a little bit of vicarious nature, that they're getting to do things that we feel like we want to do. Like this kind of, to me, also ties into the whole death wish thing that we've talked about. And, that sometimes, these characters, they are basically living I don't know about living the dream, but they're living out our fantasies in some respects. And certainly I guess that's a great segue into, of course, Thomas Crown Affair, where here's this kind of, wealthy, certainly we've talked before about how the lifestyles of the rich and famous are just already a fascination for us. And then here we have somebody who by day, he's got, this power influence on, kind of that's affecting lives and stuff like that. And of course, the original, the 68 was made with Steve McQueen, who in his day was basically the epitome of cool. So in a way that just by his casting is just that grabs both the men's attention, or he's kind of the epitome of cool for guys, and then for gals he's the epitome of the seductive hero and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think you're absolutely right. Thomas Crown, both of the movies are very much like you're vicariously living the life of a modern day capitalist prince in our society. And it's kind of what I think is slightly more interesting is the Catherine Banning role, and how it changed from the 60s to the 90s, because that's kind of, it's somewhat in keeping with the princess who gets swept off her feet a little bit, because there is still that kind of dynamic to some degree, but it's very much that she is the independent person who can think for herself, and also is not can break the rules or be immoral as the situation needs, which I think is a very interesting dynamic for him to play on with her role.
I guess at this point it's like good to kind of point out that Faye Dunaway played the original, and it's interesting putting in that context that this is 68, and I guess maybe we're starting to see the signs of women's lib at that point. Maybe, I don't know. I guess I have to admit that I only have like a limited, awareness of how like kind of that whole sexual revolution was shifting. Like kind of what the exact years were and all that. But certainly, Faye Dunaway, as the insurance investigator, in the context of 68, she's pretty liberal. Like kind of, she's not. I mean, from what we gotta gather in the story, she's somebody who's like kind of self-made. She's got her own money. She doesn't depend on any man and stuff like that. And that's actually like, I would say, is not that usual in that time period. It's for the most part in the 60s, from what I understand, it was this transition time of women going from these roles where like kind of that the expectations that they're wives and mothers and stuff, and it was only like in the 70s that we really start seeing like kind of more of the independent women, that a career woman is more even like a discussion. I don't think there's nearly that kind of discussion in this, even in the late 60s and stuff.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The fact that she's unmarried and the fact that she's so independently wealthy and that she's also willing to sort of break rules. I mean, she's not that much. It's interesting. They make some very daring decisions to make her unlikable as a character to some degree. I mean, the fact that she kidnaps a child to extort sort of information out of one people they're following is a pretty extreme move, really. The fact that she's unabashedly sleeping with Thomas Crown, and we don't know whether that's just part of the job, which actually in the 68 it is just part of the job. So because ultimately she's not completely kind of won over by his affections, but also gets kind of duped in the process. But so it's kind of like in a way it's she's a much less likable character, but also for those sort of moral choices, which I think was a pretty daring move at the time. But also ultimately sort of Steve McQueen's character kind of outwits her, and it's the kind of like the man kind of like ends up on top at the end of it. No pun intended. But I think it's definitely. I mean, I don't know if they originally aimed Thomas Crown in 68 at a male audience, because I think Thomas Crown in the 99 is definitely aimed at a female audience. That's my kind of my take on it. But
yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And I'll kind of, when we get more into the remake and stuff, I'll definitely kind of mention some things I noticed as well to that respect. I did want to kind of say though that like one of the reasons why I thought about starting off this week's discussion with the idea of the hero versus the villain kind of thing is because in some ways it's I guess like as an insurance investigator, Vicki is not so much a villain, but she's like she's really the foil / the obstacle to him, successfully, completing the heist and kind of getting away with it and stuff. Yeah. And in fact, like here's a question too. So, who is the hero of the story actually? Like, because certainly it makes it. You think that it's Thomas Crown, right? But the more I think about it as we're talking about it, I'm actually thinking that like she's actually supposed to be the hero in the sense that like it's her wanting to solve the crime and everything, and but then along the way is the complication of her falling in love and stuff like that. So it's like kind of the obstacle initially is like kind of figuring out like whether he did it and stuff, and then once it's clear, then major spoiler. Then like the obstacle is like how does he choose like kind of love versus money kind of thing stuff.
Yeah, well, I think she actually, and you're right in a way. I mean, ultimately, from taking a step back, she is the hero because she's trying to solve the crime, return the money to people, and he's basically a sociopath. You know, I mean, he's stealing from anyone and everyone's bank deposits,
right?
For his own kind of juvenile amusement, really. And you know, the philosophy of the Thomas Crown in '68 is just like that of a wealthy rebel who kind of is just there to, you know, do bank robberies because it gives him a kick, really. I mean, but ultimately, who's paying the price? It would be lots of people who've got their deposits in that bank, which is very different from I would say he's a different character from the '99 Thomas Crown. And he wins by just sort of getting the edge over someone else and winning in a very kind of cat and mouse game. But I mean, really, it's just him versus the system. He's kind of like portrayed as like this wealthy rebel.
Yeah, and as much as like kind of we do admire the rebels and stuff. I think what's the kind of the most damning thing is the fact that he may say that it's not about the money, but come on, that's what he stole. He stole money. So that's the thing that and again, we'll get more into the remake is and I feel like that's partially why I kind of changed the art heist and stuff like that, is because they kind of wanted to get away from that kind of blatant almost glaring I don't know, this not discrepancy, but this kind of thing of where contradiction, I guess, that on the one hand you're saying it's not about the money, but in the end, kind of here he is, kind of that he's not exactly giving it to the poor, he's not a Robin Hood and stuff. He's definitely if anything, he's kind of doling it out to the other criminals. And that's the thing that it's kind of where he's not exactly giving it to anybody else other than other people who just care about the money.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of being a kind of what you said, like what is the actual philosophy of this person? And because I'm not sure, and you described it as almost like it's a kind of a plot hole almost, because he's already wealthy, he's stealing money, but he says he doesn't really care about it.
Right.
And I don't even think Steve McQueen necessarily bought into it, because the scenes of him laughing to himself, smoking a cigar, drinking some whiskey or whatever it was, they came off as very hollow. I think Steve McQueen's a good enough actor that if he could understand where this character's coming from, he would be able to portray it. And I think those scenes where he's by himself and he's trying to sort of laugh in satisfaction, it comes off as very hollow, like a kind of a pantomime villain kind of performance.
Yeah,
and it's only really when the scenes with Faye Dunaway where it kind of comes alive, actually. It's really her character that really gives life to this story, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think something we should mention here is that there's a bit of a love triangle that's kind of happening as well, because the investigator the police investigator, Detective Eddie Malone stuff, played by Paul Burke, he really is kind of represents, I think, the not only just the establishment, but that the morality, I guess, in some ways, and that's what's funny, that on the one hand, I think what makes the Steve McQueen, Faye Dunaway, why they are such foils for each other is because they're both amoral. But here you have the detective trying to be the one that's saying, hey, and in some ways it's kind of the cliche, trying to play by the rules and play by the procedure and stuff like that. But I feel like he's also representing kind of the voice of kind of the angel sitting on Vicky's shoulder saying, hey, you shouldn't really be doing this, and of course she's brushing him off and stuff, as we would kind of expect.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's good. It's good in a way that she is brushing him off, because that's almost like he's very much the sort of classic patriarchal figure to some degree. The establishment figure who's knows right from wrong, and is not afraid to say it. This kind of thing. And I mean, I think both him and Tom and Steve McQueen are playing two different parts of the sort of the male identity almost, perhaps in the late 60s. You've got someone who's very interested in themselves and nothing else, and someone who's sort of upholding the, protecting everyone else, or sort of, a community first sort of aspect, even though he gets no great rewards from it. So it's yeah,
that's a great point, because I think you kind of pointed out a little bit already, is this idea that Steve McQueen is like a big boy in all this. Like he's representing kind of like this kind of the amorality of like a kid who doesn't feel any need to answer to anybody else and stuff. And the detective here is just basically like kind of the adult figure, if you will, in this love triangle and stuff.
An adult figure, but also kind of an old-fashioned figure as well.
Yeah,
because he criticizes, Faye Dunaway's lack of moral choices, which is a very kind of, even in the late 60s, was kind of like, he was already a cliche then, I think.
Yeah,
I think,
good point.
They highlight the changing roles for women, I think, through both of their characters. Whereas you could say Thomas Crown accepts her for all of her interesting immoral choices and stuff. So it's a much more kind of mature in terms of, okay, he's sort of, I think his grand view of how he deals with the world is fairly immature, but how he sort of deals with the relationship is a much more mature sort of approach, in that he's happy to accept her with all of her sort of faults and quirks.
But the one line I think of why that is, though, is that and that's one I had to kind of really write down, was well, women can trust me as long as her interests don't run counter to my own. I think that's that really kind of I think represents, like, he accepts her, but only because it doesn't run counter to his desires and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of really represents like kind of just his moral compass, I guess, that like like kind of I'll accept any of these kind of rules and stuff like that. Like he doesn't kill anybody, and he doesn't like kind of go out his way to like kind of harm anybody in any ways and stuff like that. But that's as long as like kind of it's not in his way. Like why I say that too is like kind of the golf bet and stuff, right? Where he's going to honor that bet and stuff, but I think it's kind of like it's more about him, the getting that thrill of like kind of putting that much money at stake, and then like, oh well, it didn't happen, whatever, and he still got the thrill. Like, so in other words, even if he loses the money, he's still got the thrill, and so that's kind of like what he was really after, because the line that they actually repeat again in the remake too is like kind of, what else are you going to do on a Sunday afternoon? Like an
absolutely,
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to your thing of we're vicariously living the lives of these incredibly wealthy people, gliding around and going on boats and all this kind of stuff. But the interesting thing as of now with COVID and we're all under quarantine is that I just did like a cursory search on Thomas Crown, and I found like a whole bunch of hits of popular movie or kind of media websites where they're all recommending to watch Thomas Crown at the moment. And I thought, why is this so sort of in vogue at the moment? And I realized that, Thomas Crown is all about dressing up and socializing, showing off to people, going to sort of expensive dining things and all the stuff you can't do in quarantine, right? It's almost like the epitome of all the things you can't possibly do at the moment. So I think that's why, for whatever reason, there seems to be a lot of people watching it at the moment.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I hadn't realized that, but that's a great point. That like, before it always represented kind of like this other life and stuff, but now, like kind of like you said, in lockdown, it represents a life that like we can only imagine, we can only like watch, like happening on the screen and stuff.
I started to think about this. Like, we're pretty much prisoners in our own home at the moment, and so this is almost like the exact fantasy we're all looking for, is something where we can get out and do lots of different exciting things. And I don't see the Shawshank Redemption being mentioned very much. It's like
that's a great point. It's in fact that would be an interesting like kind of survey, right? Like showing the stats of like movies like Shawshank Redemption, like kind of, before COVID-19 watch time and afterwards and stuff. That would be an interesting stat to kind of see.
I also wonder, because a lot of people are sort of talking about things in terms of, this is going to be a great reset and we'll all have to, now we'll be knitting and reading and doing home improvement at home for like 3 months. We're all going to be like changed people. But I think the opposite might be true. We might all come out of this and we'll be like, people who've just been let out of prison, and there'll be a surge in births and credit cards getting blown, and luxury watches and all sorts of things being bought. So
yeah, I think the image that came to my mind when you said that was like kind of Kevin in Home Alone, where suddenly like kind of he had this kind of freedom, like what's called when this parents and the rest of his family was gone and stuff like that. And I think it's like kind of, I think even though he was like kind of stuck at home and stuff, but I think it's like kind of almost like maybe the sequel of like kind of what would happen if Kevin was freed and to go out. In fact, I guess that was Home Alone 2, right? Was like kind of where he's like in New York City and stuff like that, kind of basically out and about. So maybe that's kind of like the closer analogy.
Well, I think in a way as well, this is kind of what we're experiencing right now. Is like some people, the fancy is you don't have to go into work every day, and so it's like people have got there. As we talk about the COVID hair, and and I was just mentioning just before we started this that Pierce Brosnan just posted a selfie of himself with like a beard, cut down here, hair, all. So he's definitely doing the full quarantine look.
Well, I guess maybe that's a good time to segue to the remake and stuff. So certainly, Pierce Brosnan, like I think even at that point, he was like well established as not only James Bond and stuff, but also like kind of even way before that. I think a lot of people were fans of him as Remington Steele. So in fact, that's one thing I kind of know from just general background, that like even before he actually ended up as James Bond, people were kind of already talking about him playing that role. So I feel like like this role, him as Thomas Crown, it was just definitely like a clear and easy kind of like he fits the role, and he like and I think what we're going to get into with the remake is that like when you make these different choices, as we talked about in other episodes, it's you're kind of picking not only that actor for this role, but you're picking that actor's the filmography and their kind of body of work for a certain role.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, this is my pet or our pet theory that basically it tours about the 80s and 90s. In order to circumvent writing good dialogue, you choose characters, actors with characters that you know and love, so you can insert them without having to do that character building.
Yeah.
And I think that's this is exactly an example of that. You've got Rene Russo from the Lethal Weapon movies as the strong kind of independent woman, and Pierce Brosnan as the suave sort of elegant man who's also handy in a fight and things like this. So it's you hit it right.
And once again, like having like kind of two strong actors like that, that's like kind of the key to like kind of and certainly you have to have everything else, of course, like good writing and good directing, all that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, here's an interesting kind of connection that we I didn't realize when we had the previous discussion, but so here we have Joe McTiernan, right, kind of as the director here, and so this was him before, of course, Rollerball, and so which was coming in a couple of years. So one of the things that we struggled with when we talked about that remake was why was it such kind of, how did somebody who's like producing a movie like this, right, how did Rollerball end up being as messed up? Well, here's one thing I didn't realize, that like part of behind the scenes, and I think it was only because I would look again at his story and stuff, but apparently by that point, issue came up where not only had he like kind of wiretapped his own wife and stuff like that, but even for Rollerball, he had wiretapped the producer to understand like kind of supposedly to get more the lowdown as to what was kind of the motivation and stuff, and he was getting arrested for that. Like so.
Wow.
Yeah. So he started kind of going down this pretty messed up road, and so now like in the context of like kind of, how did that kind of really go off the rails? And meanwhile, here's the film, right, that like kind of shows what he's capable of. It kind of makes more sense than that. Like something else was kind of going that was, more than a little distracting, I guess, for him.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because that was exactly. I mean, Norman Jewison is the. Was he not the director of
the original,
the 68?
Right?
The 68, yeah,
right,
which is
right.
also And I didn't realize it was also. You say, well, what was the guy's? Is he the writer as well?
No, I was
John
talking about McTiernan. Yeah, he's the in the remake. He's the director.
Oh, he's the director, is he?
Yeah,
Okay, right. Okay, because Norman Jewison, I think, did the original along with Rollerball. But yeah, interesting stuff. I didn't realize that at all about those guys.
Yeah, but, I had no idea either, and I think what it was like that I just kind of like I was like, hey, why does his name sound familiar and stuff?
Right.
And then I looked it up, and then kind of noticed the footnote. I saw the connection with Rollerball. I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then I started reading a little bit further down, and then I saw like kind of like what was going on in that time frame and stuff. I was like, oh, okay. And stuff. And apparently the guy he had hired, the private detective, which here's another interesting kind of connection to all this. So he worked with them like kind of different times and stuff. Like in other words, this private detective, was like kind of basically like think of him as like kind of a fixer kind of guy, right? That is used by these different stars, and like he like multiple. I mean, like if you kind of go more into never mind this director and everything like that, but the guy he hired has like just like his body of work was like all these like kind of different dark things that like he did for the different stars and all these kind of, so he was like kind of essentially like this fixer for Hollywood and stuff. And so like that's a whole other discussion and that we don't need to get into, but yeah, like kind of it's pretty messed up.
I mean, because you often hear about kind of in movies that are a bit more kind of behind the scenes, you hear about creative control, who's going to be doing what and who. But I hadn't really kind of envisaged, private detectives and various other things being employed to do that. So,
right. It sounds like something kind of out of like these movies, right? It doesn't sound like something that like And in fact, here's something that's kind of an interesting connection to like kind of Thomas Crown affair too, is that the judge that decided like kind of the case that like he originally kind of there's this thought of like kind of letting him off, like kind of like kind of granted it's wiretapping all that, but he didn't like kind of actually harm anybody and all that. But there was actually somebody at some point pointed out though that like that McTiernan didn't really show any remorse and stuff, so like kind of like a kind of almost a amoral kind of approach to life and stuff that so basically he like not only didn't let him off an easier plea and all that kind of stuff, but increased the sentence like kind of from 1 year to 3 years and stuff, so you kind of like just basically like look through, I guess, all the the stuff. And I imagine like I'm guessing that like that's another funny connection that probably McTiernan seems to be pretty charming, at least like when you're watching kind of like the making of and stuff, right? She speaks rather like kind of smoothly and all that kind of stuff. So I'm guessing that like in fact he was originally like kind of just not available for like kind of making the remake and stuff. But then like kind of like, oh, kind of, we have to have you and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's the thing, that to some degree, this is a guy who like, I think partially that's kind of like where these folks in Hollywood get this kind of feeling that they're above it all, so to speak, right? It's because like, they're put on a pedestal that like, oh, like granted, like kind of, somebody like Steven Spielberg isn't amoral to be a great filmmaker, but I think for some other people though, that like it's kind of like just, I think as we talked about before, that sometimes it goes with the sociopathic tendency that like they tend to be the CEOs and the leaders and stuff.
The uncompromising sort of decision maker. It's interesting. I mean, speaking of which, I mean, I would say we're the Thomas Crown in the remake is a very different guy in the '68 version.
Yeah, let's get
because
to that.
because if we're talking psychology, because he I think what's a very good move was not making him a bank robber, but making him an art thief.
Yeah,
because he then has to do it purely for the love of what he's stealing, rather than stealing from just about anyone. And there's also this line later on that Dennis Leary, as the detective, says, where he says, why do I really care about this? This is, these are just the playthings of the rich. I don't care if it's a few splashes of paint on a thing. It doesn't really, I'd rather go and help the guy who's just, his wife has been beaten by a husband, and or the kid got kidnapped. So this is all like superfluous to me. So, and I think that's a very good way of making the Thomas Crown character much more likable.
Yeah,
is the fact that he's doing this, and it's also a fantastic way of introducing lots of interesting art into a movie, which is interesting in of itself. And I would say earlier, we were talking about how they've used well-established characters in this. But the nice thing about this movie, I would say, and what makes it stand out from a lot of others, is that the dialogue is actually very, very good in Thomas Crown, in my opinion. I think there's some really sort of charming bits, like the bit where they're in the Caribbean getaway, and he just keeps saying, "So, you want to see it?" And it's just like this painting in a box, and you don't know if it's the one, the Monet that was stolen, and he just keeps taunting her with it. They have their champagne, and then he goes, "Want to see it?" And she goes, "Nope." "Didn't you want to see it?" "No." And then she just burns it. That's just really, really good, really clever dialogue, and especially in place of how their relationship is at that point, and also just how they build the relationship between those two. It's really well written and really well performed. I thought I can tell you, after watching a lot of bad remakes based on good originals that had good dialogue, it's really refreshing to see a remake that uses really, really well thought out dialogue. So,
and it also extends to like kind of that the dialogue, it's really like kind of what shows us the chemistry between the two. That it's like kind of where in the original, actually, a lot of it is like kind of like where the chess scene, right? We kind of mentioned a little bit is that like there's really, well, in fact, there's no dialogue in that scene. Kind of it's just them like looking at each other and stuff like that. And so I think if anything, that's definitely like kind of if we talk about differences between the two, like you said, the remake has this like really witty dialogue, and it kind of it conveys the chemistry, conveys the humor that like we also don't have as much. Like there's some humor in the original, but it's not not the same as like kind of the remake.
No, and I mean, rather than having a somewhat cringy chess game with them, we're looking at Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway sort of licking their fingers. We've now got like a full-on, totally nude scenes with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo rolling around and throwing vodka over each other and stuff. So it's a very different scene in that respect. But the other thing with like him as Thomas Crown, and having artwork as the thing he's after, actually gives it a more timeless quality. Because it's that classic thing of like Austin Powers, where Dr. Evil goes $1 million. The amount that Thomas Crown's stealing in the original is not really that much in this day and age. Whereas a Monet will always be inflation proof. So
that's a good point.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
And I think the choice of music, except for perhaps the kind of electro weird guitar-y thing while the heist is going on, the music is really well chosen in the remake as well. You've got, I think Nina Simone's Cinnamon, when during that final scene I don't think there's another, that's really the movie you think of when you hear that piece of music. I think it's very iconic.
Yeah, I think part of that is, along with like, we talked about casting and stuff like that, and then, like, faults aside with the directors and everything, we have Bill Conti, kind of for the music of this remake. So here's somebody who like, he was known for soundtracks from like films like Rocky to, on and on, like kind of. So I think that's like kind of was just, overall, he just had a really solid team. And, I think that's what's also interesting as well, is that at some point, I don't even know when it was, that here we have Pierce Brosnan, who's actually one of the producers as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well.
Yeah. So I think that's something that like kind of is a transition that kind of happened sometime between I'd say the 80s to like now, this film was in 99 and stuff like that. That there's a shift of more power being in the hands of the actors and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you kind of feel like this feels almost like Pierce's project.
Oh yeah.
The Thomas Crown, and it's almost like his. I think it's a very successful, sideline away from James Bond, because it's he really does give the character a lot of life, and it isn't necessarily just him kind of rehashing a Bond style character. But yeah, and I think as well. So that, I mean, there's just been a lot of thoughtful stuff about how to make the characters more likable as well. Because Rene Russo is much more independent character in this. She's much more financially independent. She's now a multi-millionaire according to it, and can travel and do anything else. And that you got the Dennis Leary's character saying, "Hey, do you want to go and grab some pizza?" And she's just like, "Yeah, I hold an apartment. I keep an apartment, and I've got a restaurant reservation, all this kind of stuff. So no thanks." So it's she's a much more sort of developed thing, and I think there's still a little bit of like he's still a bit of the sort of the Prince Charming kind of character. And I think you were going to be real sort of hardline feminist, they would be equal maybe on financial bit. But I mean, I think for the sake of the story, she's independent and strong enough. But she does end up a little bit sort of all over the place. I felt like her character was maybe a little bit too hysterical at times, especially towards the end. But I mean, it is what it is.
I think what is interesting is that, and I hadn't thought about it that way until you said it, was that that this film was geared more towards women, because I really didn't think of it that way when I watched it originally. But here's the thing, though, like what kind of really backs up that idea, though, is like I caught an interview with Rene Russo on this talk show called The View, right, which is basically a group of women kind of gathered around her, and the things that they were saying basically like really supported what that comment, like, because like they're like kind of dishing about kind of how like kind of how they love the fashion that like kind of that she had and stuff, and how like what was it like to be with Pierce Brosnan and like kind of Mr. and they basically make no bones about like kind of like James Bond, like kind of in other words, like kind of that's how, like, even though that, like you said, Pierce Brosnan made a project that was less about him being Bond and stuff, but the reality was like kind of it was this film that was made for women, a women's audience, that like that they wanted to see more of James Bond and stuff like that. And so even if he like I agree that he did seem to kind of have this conscious choice of making a less of being like that role of a 007 role, but clearly, the way they kind of designed things, they still had the idea that like, people were going to, especially when there's the women's audience in the audience, they were going to see, like kind of James Bond, like kind of in another interesting kind of role, I guess, and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that. There's also like Rene Russo's character. I mean, Catherine Banning. I think she's almost, her dialogue expresses what they want women to feel at various points in the movie. Like, when he started, I can't remember when he's burning the painting or whatever, she's there sort of laughs and goes, "Oh, I'll give you this, you're not boring." It's like, that's this sort of fantasy. They don't want a man who's too boring, it's like, and the cop comes across as, she does this weird kiss with him where she kisses him on the lips twice at the end, which I felt, didn't seem like that would actually really happen, but because he's a good man, because he's upholding, good moral sort of standards, but that's too boring for her. So there's this dangerous man who's sort of
I think that's what it was represent, right? It was very kind of sisterly kiss, like kind of like in other words, like certainly I think some people have different kind of standards for that, like kind of maybe but that's maybe more like a almost like European thing, because I actually had a girlfriend who like she's kind of a Swiss background and stuff, And so she would kiss on the lips just like that, like kind of, you know, like even after we were broken up and like that. So and that to me was like kind of was strange or threw me off a little bit because like to me like I think of a kiss on the cheek as like a more of a sisterly kiss and stuff like that. But apparently that's not as chic or as European, I guess maybe.
She's going to have problems these days. With, I don't know how Europe's going to even function. You know, France. You know, what do you even do? But yeah, I mean, it's yeah. So I mean, definitely there's that, and also there's I would say that is one bit where they're very clearly sort of talking to their female audience through Rene Russo. The other one is when Dennis Leary's about to sort of say, you know, where they've got the footage of them having just slept together. Right. And it's like, you sure this is just about the case? And she says, you know, don't be a cliche. You know, she's like saying, you know, this, you know, times have moved on now, you know,
right.
You can sleep with people and things and you don't necessarily has to compromise your thing, or we can think around it. So,
yeah, it's interesting how Dennis Leary, you know, I think part of it is like kind of the partnership with the I forget the name of the other actor, Frankie Faison and stuff. So like it's kind of where he's more of you know, because they're partners and stuff. It's not quite Abbott Costello, but it's kind of like more comic and stuff. And whereas the original Detective was more like you said, a more patronly figure and stuff. Here it's like they're more, I don't know, it's more like brotherly and stuff, and it's also like I think where he's not quite an equal, like, but like just more or less like that, I guess. Like in other words, it's more like three kids than it is like kind of, you know, whereas in the original it was like a fatherly figure that was like trying to, you know, basically put their foot down and stuff like that. Here like he's like kind of this more like a responsible brother that's kind of like, you know, like you know, you shouldn't be doing that, like kind of, and like and granted the love triangle is still there in this sense, like because, you know, like you said, he tried to like basically hit on her with the pizza line and stuff like that, but it's just it's interesting how it's like a slightly different dynamic, I think.
Yeah Absolutely. Yeah, but a good performance though, I'd say, from Dennis Leary. I thought he was really good in it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we didn't talk about is the age difference too. This is kind of interesting. It's a subtle thing.
Yeah.
In this case, they're roughly in the same age. You know, like there's only like a year gap between them. They're in their 40s and stuff for both Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo. Whereas, you know, in the original, Faye Dunaway is like in her 20s, whereas, you know, kind of Steve McQueen is his late 30s.
Yeah, Faye Dunaway's got one of those sort of weird things where you never quite understand how old she really is. It's like she's just got some weird mix of, apparently it's like Scottish and German or something lineage. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, again, you know, unmarried, sort of, you know, childless, very independent, not really interested in marriage at all as a character, it seems. So yeah, definitely very different from what we see a lot of the time.
And speaking of which, I think why it's even more of a fantasy is like, you know, it's, you know, the cameo of Faye Dunaway playing the psychiatrist in the remake, and you know, it's her laughing, you know, like kind of in the session, right? So it's like, okay, like a real psychiatrist is not going to be sitting there laughing at the patient, or at least last very long doing it.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of one of those things where they've tried to. She's representing the audience to some degree. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's totally unrealistic. I would actually quite like to see a psychiatrist that laughed at you at various things, have that sort of complete transparency of their personal opinion.
Right.
But, nice to see her though, doing a cameo. But she was quite nice to see her. Likewise, the music, Windmills of Your Mind, was you know, you had, I think you said it was Sting's version of it. You know, you had that, and the band plays it when they're dancing and stuff. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's good to see that.
There's a few, like we have the what's called once again the glider is another thing, and it's interesting how they kind of shifted it from him kind of doing it on his own to then this is something that like another part of Pierce and kind of you know, taking Rene Russo on the flight and stuff, and that was an interesting shift, and certainly it definitely I think made for more effective scene to kind of where it's him showing her his world and stuff.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think in some respects, in terms of the philosophy of our Thomas Crowns, I think, you know, he always comes across, rather than being like the rebellious sociopath against the system of the Steve McQueen version, this one seems he's rebellious and he's sort of against the system, but you almost get the feeling that like he's having a midlife crisis. Because it's kind of like, you know, ultimately he's looking for companionship.
Yeah.
And he's doing all these kind of weird things, but there's this sense that he's willing to kind of throw everything that he's achieved completely out the window. So this kind of lack of foresight, I mean, it's weird. He has the foresight in terms of the heist, but in terms of his life in general, you get this feeling that he's kind of without a compass. And I think it's probably this sort of a theme of like the companionship is what allows him to have this kind of compass for his, or gives him more guidance perhaps of where his life is supposed to be going. But that kind of, I don't know, it almost feels like that lack of kind of direction gives him almost like a kind of a midlife crisis feel as a character, to me anyway, as opposed to someone who's just a hard-nosed kind of rebel like Queens.
Right. And that makes sense in the sense of, you know, like where, you know, the opening scene, right, is him sitting there with a psychiatrist and saying, like, you know, discussing this idea of trust. And so we're, you know, like you can have all this money and then, you know, it can offer you a lot of material things, but yet, like, you keep people at bay then and stuff. And certainly, like, celebrities run into this where, you know, like, you have all this wealth and stuff, but who can you trust then? Who can you let, you know, who can you share it with and stuff? Besides maybe, like, you know, your own family. But if you don't have family already, then, you know, like, who can you possibly, you know, get involved with and stuff who isn't, like, kind of a threat in some ways to you and all your nice toys and stuff?
From some of the people I know, not even your own family, depending on how close they are, you know, it's, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in terms of materialism, you know, there's, the 68 version is very much like a, you know, this is what the life of a rich man is like, kind of portrayed. Whereas with the 90s one, it's almost like a celebration of materialism on, you know, in all directions, you know, it's like in a very extreme one, you know. And you look at the product placement, you've got Bulgari, you know, they're sponsoring the event. They've got the diamond necklace by Bulgari. He's wearing it, and there's a JLC Reverso, the watch he's wearing, which is a very nice sort of elegant watch. That's sort of close up to a few times, and there's quite a lot of product placement for luxury brands in Thomas Crown.
I think I was going to say
speaking
that.
of which,
Okay.
No, there's one thing we have to discuss though, and that is in terms of the fashion and the luxury lifestyles, because everyone's wearing suits, right? Another sort of thing, you know, I don't know. I think women like men in suits all the time, but anyway. So who would you say wears the better suits? Would you say we've got the Brosnan 2-piece, or we've got the McQueen 3-piece suit?
Right.
But you can tell they were all tailored. They were all immaculate suits, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like one of the things we did see also in the remake though was him actually getting fitted for a suit, right? And stuff. So they,
that's right.
They kind of made a show of that, like kind of, you know.
You're right.
And I think that was like kind of partially the idea that they really kind of wanted to embed this, you know, how, you know, like kind of part of this world is like kind of, you know, fashion is what's it called, another aspect of like kind of the world that like it's very much conspicuous consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, I still think McQueen's 3-piece suits in the original are better. But they both, you know, they both look immaculate in both of them. I mean, apparently, you know, I mean, not, you know, I'm going off on a sideline here, but Pierce Brosnan has all of his suits as Bond were tailor-made Brioni suits, which are like some of the most expensive Italian made, you know, tailor-made suits from some material. So you're talking like, I think it must be 10, maybe 15 grand per suit for every suit that you see him wearing in Bond. And I'm sure Thomas Crown is a similar sort of level, if not more, maybe.
Yeah, I think, how's that saying go about no off the rack for these babies?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what I wanted to say though was, you know, like I think part of the whole thing too is, here we have a film that's kind of like 1999, and so we're coming on the new millennium and stuff, and this is like kind of, you know, post 80s, you know, the whole mergers and acquisition kind of, you know, that the very things that like kind of American Psycho kind of, you know, portrays and stuff. We're kind of coming out of that because I feel like the new millennium was like kind of there was as we got closer to the new millennium, there was more discussion about like kind of, is there more than material wealth and stuff, and then you know, certainly I think, you know, that became more and more of a theme over these past years, and I think that's in some ways like kind of what also we're seeing, which I think, you know, it's interesting how that's maybe in some ways what the art also represents, you know, is that like that this kind of, you know, and I feel like if there's a kind of, I don't know about maybe unintentional theme, is just this idea that like, you know, is there more to life than wealth? And I feel like that's kind of like, you know, between the art being like kind of the what's stolen stuff, and then also like here's this person who like basically is willing to, you know, almost throw his life away for it. It's kind of just all representing, I think, that idea that like, you know, you can have all the money in the world and yet like feel like empty and stuff.
Yeah. Unless you've got other things to interest you, like either serial killing or art or bank robberies. Yeah. So, I mean, it's, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think this and American Psycho definitely represent this kind of end of flat out kind of 80s capitalism into looking into different sort of avenues. But yeah, speaking of the art, I mean, one of the more interesting things for me is the choice of Magritte's Son of Man, which is the bowler hat with the apple in front of the face. Which, I mean, if you look at the title, and I think the connection to the movie is that basically it's kind of things being hidden in plain sight. In my, you know, the man is being obscured by this apple. I mean, I think that has a very biblical interpretation that's my interpretation of it anyway, in that you have, the reason it's called the Son of Man is because the apple, the fruit of the tree of knowledge, you know, apples often represent that in painting. And in this one, it's obscuring the man, essentially. So it's sort of like, I think the underlying message is that religion obscures or hides the achievements of man under the guise of God. And so, and that's why it's the Son of Man, knowledge being the Son of Man rather than, you know, the Son of God. I think that's the kind of the underlying message in that movie, in that picture, I should say.
Right.
But I think it's a very interesting choice of picture of artwork to have in the movie. And I you know, as I say, the bowler hats at the end is perfect, because there's this whole thing of like, you know, the truth is being obscured by something that's being held, you know, held in front of our face, but we don't see. Like the painting itself is and I'm, again, spoiler alert, you know, he didn't really steal it the whole time, which I think is really, which is a very interesting thing. And that also kind of fuels this whole midlife crisis thing, because why would you pretend to steal a painting, not really steal it, and then go through all this I mean, it seems very, very frivolous. Like, and he's going to see a psychiatrist. So, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I keep going back to calling it a fantasy, because it's kind of like that. Like you said, what was the point of all this? Like, kind of, you know, was it just simply a midlife crisis? And you know, like, because also like on top of it was like he did steal this painting, right, for this other painting that Rene Russo's character, you know, like kind of just, you know, flippantly or casually pointed out that she wanted and stuff, and asked her like kind of, oh, you're gonna get that for me and stuff, and so I think that's the thing that like it's basically him like saying like, you know, I can do anything and stuff, and basically proving it to her, you know, like kind of.
Well, I think that's a really interesting thing in the remake, is this who's got the confidence to do what actions at various times. Like I think it's so cool that immediately after the painting's stolen, the player, he takes her on a date to the museum that she's investigating for the painting. I think that's just like, in terms of ballsy moves, you know, that's pretty much up there, you know. And then likewise,
and he knows that, you know, she's the investigator.
Yeah.
You know, kind of, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. and the fact that, you know, she will just go and casually burn a painting, you know, that could be worth, you know, priceless, on a campfire in the Caribbean is another one. It's like there's a lot of really sort of cool moves of confidence on both of their parts. So I think it's really well balanced. And actually, that was one thing I wanted to, which I think is a really interesting theme. Is, you know, you've got this jazz soundtrack, which obviously jazz has this sort of thing of the music sort of intersecting, things come in and out, you know, and you've got different styles coming in and out. But also this is like this represents their relationship and their sort of moves, you know, because they don't know, do they trust each other, do they don't, you know, who's got the power in various different situations. And even at the end, you don't really know. You can't, you know, there's this thing, you don't know if they're really going to be happy. Is there going to be a happy ever after? Who's going to stay on top, who's not? And it's like that line where where Faye Dunaway says to them, you know, are there any happy endings for, or somebody says it anyway. Are there any happy endings for people like us? And I actually really like that kind of thing of, you know, the plot you know, between the characters, there's this interplay, and then at the end, it just kind of carries on, and there's this kind of very open-ended feeling to it. You almost feel like the music and the story sort of could go on, which is a really interesting ending for me.
Do you know the story of the scorpion and the frog?
No, I saw that in notes. I was curious as to what that actually was. Yeah.
So it's basically you know, like one of those kind of classic fables, and they often use it for like kind of this kind of general discussion about this very idea, though, like, which I feel like is kind of tied to just that question, like, you know, will these two really end up, you know, making it? Because so the deal is that, like, this, you know, Scorpion asks his frog to take him across because, you know, like he can't swim, right, and stuff. And so the frog goes, you know, but you're gonna sting me, right, and stuff. And so the Scorpion goes, nah, you know, like if I sting you, right, you know, like I'm gonna die, right? So why would I do that, like, stuff? So, you know, of course, in real life, you know, he could wait till he gets to the other side to steal himself. But here's the twist, though, is that, like, the Scorpion still does sting the frog in the middle of the river. And so, and the frog goes, why would you do that? Now we're both going to die and stuff. And the Scorpion basically is shrugging to say, you know, but I'm a scorpion. Like, kind of that. So in other words, it's this idea about, like, you know, our nature's our nature and stuff. And so, you know, it kind of makes you wonder then, like, kind of, I mean, you know, again, I think that's why it's a fantasy, is that because we don't deal with this question. Like, kind of, you only see him kind of riding off into the sunset, as we typically do for fantasies and stuff. But I mean, in real life, I mean, in terms of, like, kind of, you know, like, okay, let's say 5 or 10 years from now, like, you know, like what are, I mean, you know, granted, he's probably got more wealth and that's not going to be problem and stuff, but it's still not going to basically change his nature, right, of, like, kind of wanting to kind of feel like a thrill, unless, of course, that, like, why he really wanted the thrill was because he wanted to just have somebody kind of share the things with him and stuff. But that, I think that doesn't really, like, in terms of in real life, that doesn't really answer the real questions and stuff.
No. And I think as well, there's also the question of the painting. I mean, it's been stolen. Right. They're going to send someone else to get him, and that never gets really resolved. You know, they are going to be hunting for them. And it's almost likely the fact that she runs off or she flies off, she's going to be a suspect. Yeah, and in that, given what's happened already. So, yeah, no, I mean, I think as well, like you said, the Scorpion the Frog's an interesting one because it's this nature. And I think that's sort of, you know, you look at the title, the Thomas Crown Affair. It's kind of like, this is this fantasy affair of, like, star-crossed lovers who because of their natures will never really sort of resolve it. So again, it's this kind of thing, you know, people who are probably in very stable relationships. It's sort of fantasy of this or something. So, well,
but as you know, like, kind of it again, like, for me, it's interesting how, like, I didn't really think of this as, like, kind of a movie made for a women's audience, but now the more I think about it, I think that kind of like, just the fact that, like, how much of a fantasy it does reinforce that, because this is, like, kind of, you know, like, this is pre 50 Shades of Grey, so it's like kind of the mergers and acquisition fantasy version of it, because, you know, we look at 50 Shades of Grey, right? It's once again, like, kind of this wealthy billionaire who, like, has all the money, kind of, and so I think it's, like, kind of just almost like, in some ways, like, the hints of, like, kind of the character in 50 Shades
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of almost like criticize these kind of things. They're a little bit kind of Cinderella-ish, you know. It's
Yes.
kind of like risque Cinderella, you
Right.
know, stories. But yeah, no, I mean, but I think this is better because it's got interesting music, interesting artwork, and the whole heists are like fascinating to watch. So it's got enough to hold, you know, most men's attention as well, which is
Right.
good.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's the bottom line for me. Like kind of that, and again, why I didn't think of it as necessarily a woman's film because like like to me like I like the clever heists, the action involved, just the intrigue and everything like that. It kind of felt like very much like a James Bond movie. Um,
Yeah,
you know, that was made into a heist and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of for me like what it was. And I was a fan like kind of of Pierce Brosnan even before James Bond, even before this, because there were just the things that he did. And again, in Remington Steele, even it was the dialogue there. So I think in some ways, that's kind of like how for Pierce Brosnan, it was like kind of like, oh, okay, this is a easy choice to make and stuff of kind of for him to kind of really push this project and everything because it was basically like kind of the kinds of characters he's played before. It was kind of the dialogue and kind of the action that he just basically just done all these kind of these other films and shows and stuff like that. So
well,
yeah,
I think what's good is he actually gets better dialogue than he's had in most other movies. In this one, I think it's quite nice to see Pierce Brosnan not having to deliver cheesy one-liners.
well, apparently, like that was I forget who they brought in, but like we'll have to kind of look up a little bit about that. But like that, it was the apparently the original first pass script was like kind of so for things like dialogue, and then they brought in the team. It's funny how some of these productions will do that, where they're folks who really are good at dialogue, and they just kind of really bring something to that. Because certainly like you and I know, like Empire Strikes Back kind of had that effect and stuff, where it just lacked like kind of that charge and chemistry and stuff like that. And then certainly we saw the after effects of kind of how it became a lot more interesting, I guess, to say the least.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, and I think it's a very densely packed movie as well. It kind of there isn't really any kind of pauses, whereas I would say the 60s one relies on very kind of the cutting of the sort of lots of fragmented squares. We didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, that was a really interesting effect. And I don't know too many films. I don't know. Maybe there are like kind of, but I was gonna say I didn't know too many films that kind of use that and stuff. But it's kind of it really did add to it, like kind of because sometimes what it felt like was that like you saw like specific things that would be the focus in the shot, but meanwhile it had something else as the focus of the shot, and it was like. I don't know, it was fragmented, but yet like it felt like that it showed you what to focus on and stuff. It was like an interesting effect.
Yeah, and I guess it's a kind of, a visual representation of misdirecting your attention as well, which I thought was quite clever. They're telling, hey, focus on this, but there could be other things going on over here that you're not noticing, which I thought was pretty cool. And also there's I felt like there was quite a lot of, and I suppose that's just the pace of movies in the 60s compared to the 90s.
Right.
There's quite a lot of like Steve McQueen looking cool. There's quite a few minutes of him just. So and there's none of that. Well, not too much of that. I would say in the remake. It just tells the story. So that was good. And I would say overall, I mean, I much prefer the remake to the original. I don't know about you, but.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that's one thing that we'll probably rarely say on the show is like kind of that where the remake is better or much stronger movie than the original stuff. I mean, certainly, some people would argue like, oh, kind of the original was what it was with Steve McQueen and all that kind of stuff, or what made it possible. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But on the other hand, I think that like in terms of watchability, like, if I was going to rewatch either of these, it would definitely be clearly the remake over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, like we covered most of the different things. The only things I might mention is that like there was talk at one point of a sequel, you know, like kind of which
Right.
I don't know, like kind of where would you kind of go with that? I guess with a sequel.
I know. Sequel to a you got an average movie that gets remade as a good movie, and then you're going to try and remake it again and increase. You know, that's a Thomas Crown level of confidence with your pitch.
And I think you know, like if you just kind of do like another kind of bunch of heists and stuff like that, it just would feel like, you know, even if like however well you did it, it just feel like it'd be kind of rehashing, you know, like to me anyways, because to me part of what made it work besides the heist and stuff was just simply the dynamic of like kind of, you know, like you know, we'll see, won't see and stuff, and then you're starting off with the film of a sequel that like they are together. So unless you like, I don't know, throw Rene Russo on the curb or something, you know, like kind of, you know, like what would you do, kind of, you know, like kind of to do the will they, what won't they kind of thing and stuff.
I guess you could do it all with online dating in a quarantine society. Maybe they put a modern twist on it. I don't know. But
the other thing was like a discussion of another remake with Michael B. Jordan, who, you know, I don't know if when we'll get to talk about Friday Night Lights, but he was like kind of one of the main actors or characters from there.
Okay.
And you know, the actor, of course, not the athlete and stuff like that, but he's, you know, like an interesting choice because you know, certainly in Black Panther he was like one of the main characters there as well.
Yeah.
So certainly his star has been on the right. Creed, of course, more recently was like, you know, another film that like he really is kind of made a name for himself as a leading actor and stuff like that. So who knows? It's, I think, still like kind of in some level of development, some possibility, but it does beg the question then is like you said, like never mind the sequel and stuff, but you know, like here we have a remake that was stronger than the original. You know, will it take, you know, more than even like kind of Thomas Crown level confidence to like kind of actually do something that was going to be that much more watchable, I guess.
I mean, the problem is in the 90s, you know, Thomas Crown will be off in his yacht doing all this kind of stuff. Now,
Right.
Thomas Crown will be on Instagram most of the time. He'll be taking selfies of himself next to his model girlfriend and stuff. And there was that sort of scene with like the signed photograph of Cindy Crawford. I don't know if you noticed that.
Right, yeah.
Like and then so it's kind of like, I don't know if that would be, yeah. So I don't know. Now it would just be, he'd be on his private jet, sort of like on Instagram all the time. She'd be, Rene Russo would have to be like purposely nudging, saying, "Get off your phone."
So coming up, we've got Andromeda Strain is like kind of one of the ones that we talked about, kind of continuing the pandemic series that we've had. And let's see what else we've got coming up. The
Westworld Redux.
Oh yes, and we will be revisiting Westworld. That's definitely something that we're both excited about, with the season 3 is kind of taking things in a somewhat new direction. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds, and we will catch you at the movies.